Prestige, history, power, luxury, Sydney. That's King Street in 5 words. This isn't just a road, it's where the world's biggest names come to set up shop. Think Louis Vuitton, Apple, Dior, Chanel. They're all here. But why this street? Well, for over 200 years, this has been the heart of Sydney's legal and commercial muscle, and the stories here are wild. We're going to pass a bank designed by the same master architect behind the Grand State Library, to the first church that started life as a courthouse before a royal investigator stepped in to change the plans. We'll even see the spot where a normal girl met her real-life prince, and of course the secret World War II command base that's now one of Sydney's most prestigious hotels. It's a cracker of a morning. The sun is hitting the sandstone just right. Grab a coffee and let's take a walk. G'day guys, hope you're all doing well. Welcome to King Street, a place that honestly has a bit of everything. Now, full disclosure, this street is so dense with history that I'm bound to miss a few things on this walk. So, if you know a story or a hidden detail I've skipped over, give it a shout out in the comments. I genuinely love reading your stories and learning something new from you lot. Righto, starting here in Queens Square, the historic heart of the city. First, we've got the statue of Queen Victoria. She's looking straight ahead at the courts, keeping a watchful eye on the judges and politicians to make sure they're behaving. That building next door is the Hyde Park Barracks. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site and a must-see top-class history, and it's actually free to visit. Then there's St. James's Church, the oldest in the CBD. It was designed by a convict named Francis Greenway, who was originally sent to Australia for forgery. The funny thing is, this building was never meant to be a church. But then a high-ranking investigator named Commissioner Big arrived from London and basically told the governor, stop spending so much on grand cathedrals, use the courthouse instead. So Greenway had to pivot mid-build, adding that square tower and steeple to turn a house of law into a house of God. And finally, the Supreme Court, which has been the legal heart of Australia since the 1820s. All right, let's talk about the man himself, Philip Gidley King. He's the reason this street has its name. Now, King was the 3rd governor of the colony, and let me tell you, he didn't have an easy run. He was actually part of the 1st Fleet, and Governor Phillip sent him straight to Norfolk Island to start a settlement there with just a handful of convicts. He did such a solid job that he eventually came back to run the whole show as governor in 1800. But here's where it gets interesting. King spent most of his time in a flat-out war with the New South Wales Corps, the military officers who were basically running a massive illegal rum trade. King was a naval man, a strict rule follower, and he hated the corruption. He fought them tooth and nail to break their monopoly and even started a government brewery just to give people an alternative to their rot gut rum. Just quickly check out the Greenway wing over on the left. You've got that original 1820s convict brickwork, but those grand stone arches were a later addition by James Barnett. Barnett was the guy who did the GPO in Martin Place. Back to the governor. He was also a big believer in second chances. He was one of the first to give emancipists, ex-convicts real jobs and responsibilities in the government. He even started the colony's first newspaper and opened the first schools for orphan girls. In the end, though, the constant fighting and a nasty case of gout wore him out. He resigned in 1806, but his legacy is literally built into the streets we're walking on today. Just while we're waiting on the lights here, if you're enjoying the walk and finding these little history nuggets interesting, do me a massive favour and hit that like button. It really helps the channel get these stories out to more people, and it tells the algorithm that you're into this kind of deep dive history. check out these two titans on our left. On one corner, you've got the Trust building that was the old Daily Telegraph headquarters back in the day, and right opposite is the Dior boutique. It's actually made up of two buildings joined together, including Colonial Chambers, which was Sydney's very first skyscraper. Back in 1912, people were so rattled by how tall it was that they literally passed a law to stop anyone from building anything higher. Now, don't let the luxury shops fool you. This street has a pretty dark underbelly. Just back in 2021, an Underworld boss was actually taken out in a full-on gangland execution right on the corner of Castlereagh, right about here somewhere. And if you go back to the 1920s, this whole area was a battleground for the razor gangs. They'd be at each other's throats out here, then end up in the courthouse we just passed. It's a street where extreme wealth and high-stakes crime have always lived side by side. This stretch of King Street is essentially the runway of Sydney. It's where you'll find the biggest luxury flagships in the country, from the sparkling glass of Tiffany & Co. to the heritage-rich home of Hermès in the Trust building. And because it's so prestigious, the celebrity sightings here are legendary. Queen Elizabeth II herself once graced the floors of David Jones just a block back. And Dior actually hosted their first international show outside of Paris, right here. More recently, Hollywood royalty like Zendaya was spotted doing some retail therapy in the area while she was in town for a movie premiere. Even music stars like Jelly Roll have been seen hitting the stores on George and King, though he had a bit of a run-in with the security at Louis Vuitton. It's the kind of place where you never know who you might bump into while they're picking up a new season fit. I'm curious, if money was no object and you could walk into any one of these stores and pick out whatever you wanted, which one are you heading into first? Are you a Dior fan, or is it Hermès for you? Or maybe you've actually spotted someone famous while you're out shopping in the city. Drop a comment and let me know. I'd love to hear your dream shop picks or your best celebrity spot stories. We're coming up on the entrance to Pitt Street Mall on our left now. Believe it or not, this used to be a regular, busy road full of cars, trucks, and even trams. They didn't actually close it off and turn it into a pedestrian mall until 1987. Now, it's one of the top 10 most expensive retail strips on the planet. The rents here are absolutely eye-watering, which is why you only see the biggest global brands. It's also home to the Strand Arcade, which opened in 1891 and is the last original Victorian arcade left in the city. Look at that building on the corner, the Sol Pattinson building. That chemist was there for nearly 150 years. It's a great example of how this mall has managed to keep its historic charm while becoming a modern shopping powerhouse. Now, as we cross Pitt Street and head toward George, I want you to use your imagination for a second. We're actually walking right over the top of the tank stream. Nearly 250 years ago, this wasn't a street at all. It was a lush green valley, and the tank stream was the fresh water source that literally decided where Sydney was built. Back then, there was actually a waterfall right near this intersection. It was only about 2 or 3 metres high, but it was a key landmark for the Gadigal people and later the first settlers. As the colony grew, they carved tanks into the sandstone nearby to store the water, hence the name Tank Stream. Eventually, though, the city grew too fast, the water got polluted, and they ended up bricking the whole thing over in the 1850s to turn it into a storm drain. So Right now, as we're walking past these glass towers, that ancient stream is still flowing directly beneath our boots in a series of underground tunnels. It's the hidden ghost of old Sydney, still running to the harbour. You know, it's funny looking at the bitumen here, but I was reading the other day that this exact stretch right here between Pitt and George was actually the first place in Sydney to get a wooden road back in the 1880s. The noise from all the horse-drawn carriages on the stone was so loud you couldn't hear yourself think. So they had this bright idea to pave the street with blocks of Aussie hardwood soaked in tar. It worked a treat for the noise, but apparently when it rained really hard, the wood would swell up and the blocks would start popping out of the ground. Imagine trying to drive a carriage through that. They eventually just paved over the lot, so those old 19th century blocks are probably still down there right now, just sitting under our feet while we walk over them. Now, we're coming up on one of my absolute favourite corners in the whole city. There's something about the architecture right here that just feels right. First up, on our left, have a look at the Robertson Reed building. It's that classic red brick and sandstone combo. It was designed by Robertson and Marx, who were basically the architects of Sydney back in the early 1900s. I love the detail around the windows. They just don't build them with that kind of craftsmanship anymore, do they? But wait until we get a bit further down. We've got the ACA building coming up with those wild green tiles. And then the Grace building, which is the one I teased you about earlier. That was the secret World War II base. And we can't miss the Hotel CBD on the corner, which has its own bit of liquid history. This little pocket of King Street is basically a masterclass in Sydney's evolution. The Grace building. Now, this place is a bit of a survivor. When it opened in 1930, the Grace brothers thought York Street was going to be the new main thoroughfare thanks to the Harbour Bridge. They were dead wrong. The Depression hit, shoppers stayed over on George Street, and this massive Gothic beauty became a bit of a white elephant. But then came 1943, and the federal government requisitioned it for the war effort. It became the top secret Sydney headquarters for the US military under General Douglas MacArthur. Imagine this. MacArthur himself was running the entire Southwest Pacific campaign from right inside those walls. They actually built a secret air raid shelter in the basement, and there are even stories about underground tunnels that supposedly linked the building all the way to Circular Quay. Today, it's a luxury hotel, but if you look up at those soaring Gothic towers and flying buttresses, you can still feel that old world power. Not a bad spot for a secret base. Right, on our left here is Merchant House, built in 1848. It's a real survivor from the early days, designed by the master architect John Bibb. Back then, it was a fancy merchant's house and office, but the wild thing is what's underneath, historians reckon, some of the colony's very first convict huts were on this exact spot back in the 1790s. It's basically Sydney history layered right on top of itself. As we head down this final slope toward the water, you're witnessing one of the biggest transformations in Sydney's history. Just a few decades ago, you wouldn't have been able to walk here. This whole end of the street was a gritty industrial maritime area full of finger wharves and massive warehouses. Back in the 19th century, Darling Harbour was a working port. It was the engine room of the colony, sending wool and wheat out to the world. But as shipping changed and containerisation took over in the 70s, these docks were basically left to rot. It wasn't until the Sydney Olympic Games in 2000 that the King Street Wharf we see today was born. They cleared out the old container hard stands and replaced them with this billion-dollar mix of restaurants, bars and luxury apartments. They even kept the original timber boardwalk in some spots, so you're literally walking on history as you reach the harbour's edge. Check out this absolute beauty on the corner. This was the Citibank of Sydney, built back in 1892. But it wasn't just a bank, it actually doubled as a post office for all the wharfies and merchants down here. The man behind it was W.L. Vernon, and the contrast in his work is just legendary. Here, he's built this gritty Victorian Italianate fortress to handle the rough and tumble of the docks. But then, he's the same bloke who designed the Art Gallery of New South Wales and the State Library. It's wild to think the same mind that created those elegant temples of culture also built this tough-as-nails bank and post office combo. It's got so much character, it's survived while almost everything else around it was torn down and replaced with glass. And here we are, at the Slip-In. Now, if you're looking for a fairy tale, this is exactly where it started. It was a balmy night during the 2000 Olympics, and a regular Aussie girl named Mary was out for a few drinks with friends. She ended up chatting with a bloke who introduced himself simply as Fred. They hit it off over some pizza and beers, and it wasn't until about an hour later that someone whispered to her, "Do you know who that is?" Turns out, she'd just spent the night flirting with the Crown Prince of Denmark. Fast forward to today, and our Mary is now the Queen of Denmark. It's a literal Cinderella story that happened right here in a Sydney pub. They even fly the Danish flag outside to this day to mark the spot. You know, as we get closer to the water, it's worth thinking about the sheer volume of history that's marched down this exact stretch of bitumen. King Street has always been a stage for Sydney's biggest moments. I'm talking about massive royal visits like in 1954 when Queen Elizabeth II did her first tour. The crowds were so thick right here that people were literally climbing onto the balconies and window ledges just to catch a glimpse of her. And it's not just the royals. This street has seen everything from the jubilant victory in the Pacific parades at the end of World War II to the massive protest marches that have shaped our laws. Even the legendary Sydney Olympics in 2000, the energy on this street was electric. It was like the whole world had descended on this one little corridor to celebrate. Whether it's a celebration, a protest, or a parade, King Street is where Sydney comes to show its face. It's the spine of the city's social history, and you can almost feel the echoes of all those millions of footsteps as we walk it today. Well, there you go. We've made it from the top of the city all the way to the harbour. Think about what we've seen in just one street. We started at the convict-built heart of Queens Square, walked over an ancient hidden stream, passed through the luxury playground of the global elite, saw a secret World War II command base, and ended up passing a pub where a local girl became a queen. It's been a bit of a journey, hasn't it? If you've enjoyed this slow stroll through Sydney's history, please hit that subscribe button and join the community. I've got plenty of other videos on the channel. Some are deep dives into the stories behind our famous cross streets, and others are just peaceful, uncut walks if you need a bit of a quiet moment. Thanks for joining me today. I'm off to find a cold drink. Catch you in the next one. See ya.